So I successfully ran the build, and so now let me make a bit more configuration here. Like let's say capture the artifact. So this is building a jar file, and so maybe I want to expose that, for example, so that I can run the test later, or the QA guys can download the build from here. I could also publish the JUnit test. I think again, the one other thing I like about the UI is that it tells you that, because we don't need to remember the past, right? So if I weren't seeing this auto-completion, I probably wouldn't pick this up right away. But again, so these inline error detection on the fly is really helpful. So let me do that, and then make another build. So now this time the build turned yellow, meaning there was a test failure. So I guess I botched the order here, but the reason the test failed is because I got the obviously broken test. So another thing that I should show you is how to set up the triggering, because well, so far I've been manually starting the build, but that's not very interesting in production. So for this, I'll just tell Hudson to poll repository every single minute. This is from the cron syntax here. So now that I discovered my test program, let me fix a test. And then the Hudson should notice that there was something went wrong, and well, I mean there was a new commit that happened in the repository, and it will start building. So while it's going to notice that, I'll show you some of the additional UI. So one of the things, well, so now that we started collecting the test report, it can tell you information like how many tests you actually had and what are the failures, and looking at all the gory details about where the test programs are. You could also tag the build from the Hudson. So let's say you decided that. Normally the way it happened is that you got a lot of developments going on in the trunk, and then at some point you decided that this particular revision was a good candidate for release. So you might want to create a tag out of it and so on. So you can do those things from Hudson, and you don't have to do it on your local workspace. So it helps you put a lot of things on the server. Yeah. So I guess here it is that the Hudson noticed that there was a change, and then it built, and then it fixed the test program. It recorded my change that I made in this release, and then there was no test failure. So you can see that there's one less failure, the same number of tests, and so on, and so forth. So that's the kind of basic things that the Hudson can do that the people find useful. I guess in general, so the putting reporting Hudson sort of lets you add one more dimensions to the program one more dimension that is useful, the time axis. So because Hudson keeps track of records for every single build, you can see this sort of time-wise trend, like the fact that there was a less failure or there were new failures. Because often what you're interested in seeing is like the new failures, right? So if you're really good, your project has no test failures, but if you're like one of us, your project has known test failures. So in those contexts, you're more interested in the new regression that you might have caused, not the one that have been failing for the past few days. So this time axis information is very useful. So so that's some of the basic Hudson stuff. And then, so I guess the reason this kind of thing is interesting, I think, is, so let me try to explain it to some of the concrete use cases. And this is, in fact, the motivation that forced me to write this. So before I had Hudson, well, I'm the guy who forget to commit files. And back then, I was using CVS. So like, well, I made files in different directories, but I only commit 4 out of 5 files. And then, well, people don't update their workspace right away, but eventually they do, and then they notice that the build breaks, and they start looking at the log, and the people write me email that I think you forgot to commit these files, so can you double check? And sure they are the problem. And if I'm lucky, if the developer actually, my fellow colleague discovers the problem like that, but in the worst case, the program goes unnoticed until the nightly build, and that breaks. And then what happens is that on the next day, the testing team depends on this officially promoted nightly builds. And so if there is no nightly build, then the testing team won't be able to do anything the next day, and so people waste time. So with something like Hudson, however, it's constantly doing the build and test. So if you actually fail to commit any files, or if you make more subtle mistakes, like cause some test regressions and so on, you get to notice right away, like within a few minutes. And so, and then in this way, you still probably remember if the change comes in, like if the program report comes in 5 minutes, you probably still remember sort of the context of what changes you are making. And so that allows you to fix the problem extra quickly. And speaking of this kind of mental context and the brain cache spill, as I call it, is also more evident in the test regression handling. So again, well, in the traditional model of doing the nightly builds and then running a test after the nightly build, is that there's a long delay until the problem gets fixed. So let's say you made a change in the Monday morning, which caused some subtle regressions, and then the earliest that problem gets discovered will be the Monday night, because that's when the test runs. Now, so what happens is that you as a developer gets to notice that problem in the Tuesday morning, and then that only the fix to the regression can be only validated in Tuesday night. So you can see that it sort of takes a long time span, even though you aren't really sort of spending attention all the time, but it takes a fairly long time span to be able to, detect the regression and confirm the fix. So again, if you're constantly doing builds and tests, it makes this time window gets much shorter. So the test runs normally takes much longer than just 5 minutes, but still it finishes in, say, 30 minutes or 1 hour. So that's still good enough time compared to the 2 days. And you probably still remember the kind of changes that you are making. So when you actually see the test failure, you just might still remember the kind of, the thing that give you a hunch about where to look for the problem. And the verification of the fix also happens right away. So within a few hours time frame, not days, you finish this whole cycle. Another benefit of having the shorter time span is that there's lesser chance of multiple problems like this going on at the trunk. So imagine if single problem takes 2 days to fix, then if you're a bigger team, chances are that the multiple problems like that is ongoing at the same time, which makes it harder to actually diagnose the problem and so on. So this have additional productivity benefits like that. Another reason I sort of started writing Hudson was that back then we had this email that the SQE folks send, the testing people send every night, that sort of generated out of their cron script. Now, so the problem with that is that the email gets sent regardless of whether a test successfully passed or failed. And so unless the developer is actually actively paying attention, well, you're not going to notice those things. So if the project is in a good mood and then tests are all passing, then people stop paying attention because they think the build is going fine. And then only right before the release that they discover that, actually the test has been failing all along. And if you go back to the email history, it's been failing for like 2 months easily. So, so I have to admit that this all happened in Sun. So you're not alone in doing these kind of things. But that's why something like Hudson is really useful, even at this basic level. So by now, hopefully, you get the underlying theme that's going on here. That let the machines do things. Let's say do more automation, and thereby reducing the turnaround time till you discover or fix the problems. And then also by having Hudson do it, which is a web app as opposed to some people, it makes things a bit more transparent. Everyone knows that this is a single website that they can come to get the information. You no longer have to ask a team lead where to see the last test report and so on. And then finally, by having the web app do these things, you remove the people from the loop. So again, it all too often happens that someone goes to the vacation or take a sick leave, and you suddenly no longer know how to tag this build or make the test runs. So that's a lot worse. I mean, that's very bad. Whereas if the Hudson remembers those things, it never takes vacations. So in that way, you remove the people dependency from the loop, and that's a good thing.